Welcome to the Neuro Air Podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Neuro Air Podcast. I am really excited today because I have Megan on the show. Megan, can you say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody. So happy to be with you.
Cannot wait to dive in, and we are getting ready to have such a beautiful conversation about the power of our breath and Megan's journey to what led her to do what she does. And so before we get started, I just wanted to read a little bit about Megan. Megan Ashton is the founder of Unity Breathwork and a leading advocate for raising safety standards in the breathwork industry. And can I say that that is so important?
Thank you.
Yeah. Her own healing journey through trauma, bulimia, and alcohol dependence brought her to conscious, connected breathwork and showed her firsthand its transformative power for trauma and grief processing, addiction recovery, and deep nervous system healing. And for everybody that knows me so far, you can already probably tell why I invited Megan on the show. After years of collaborating with international breathwork schools and witnessing the gaps in facilitator training and safety culture, Megan became a vocal advocate for trauma-informed practice, facilitator competency, and public education around the real risks of altered states work, so people can make informed decisions about who they choose to work with. Today, she leads healing-focused retreats in Mexico and directs Unity Breathwork's GPBA certified training, one of the most comprehensive trauma-informed breathwork certifications available. Megan, how is that just even to hear your own bio? Let's start with that.
I mean, it's interesting, actually. I feel a little bit proud hearing it. I'm so passionate about breathwork, and then also the safety element around it. I think With great power comes great responsibility, and people don't realize how powerful the breath is. And so it's just something that I'm so dedicated and passionate about, and I'm happy to be speaking about it.
I cannot wait. And speaking of how powerful our breath is, I was going to turn it over to you for a minute to just kind of lead us.
I would
get us
love to.
Started on this session together.
Just something short and grounding for all of us. If you're driving, please don't follow along. Everybody else, I'll invite you to close your eyes if that's possible. And just begin to breathe through the nose, soft and slow, deep down into the belly. Focusing on bringing that breath as deep as possible. And allowing these soft, nourishing breaths to slow your mind down just a little. Connect you to your inner landscape. Maybe even placing a hand on your heart as you breathe. Just taking in a few breaths of self-love. Taking in 2 more soft, nourishing breaths, and then when you're complete, gently blinking your eyes open. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but my heart just loves it. My hand on my heart just feels so fulfilling to me.
Yeah, that connection is so powerful. So I hope that if you are driving, doing something
try
else
it later.
Try it later, or if you couldn't do it with us. And hopefully you guys can all just take a step just a second to notice. Just notice how your body feels for a minute. So many of you listening, I know, are so busy running around with kids and responsibilities, and how powerful it is when we just get to sit in that noticing. So thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Leanna.
So I kind of love to start off with this question. It's kind of the who is Megan question. I know I read your bio, but who is Megan in connection to just kind of your own healing journey? Like what you've been through that kind of led you to where you are. I'm always fascinated by kind of the journey that got you to what you do now. So, just in a few minutes, I know that's a big question, but who is Megan?
Yeah, so my journey to the breath, I think it started when I was a kid, really. I always just felt a bit like the black sheep, a little bit like, the lost middle child. And I didn't realize I was holding on to these feelings. I'm just a kid. I'm not thinking about it consciously. So when I was very young in grade 8, I turned to alcohol, and then I turned to food. I struggled with anorexia and then bulimia. And I spent my whole adult life looking for a solution. I've always been wellness oriented. I always had, like nutrition books, even when I was a kid, and dream books.
Same.
And I was always interested in all of these things. And so I tried all sorts of things in my early 20s. I became a clinical hypnotherapist because I really believe in the power of the subconscious mind. But I wasn't suggestible. So I didn't actually help me with my bulimia. And even though it helped other people, I felt out of authenticity offering it to others. So it never really stuck. I also became a holistic nutritionist. I became a yoga teacher. I got my certifications in Reiki. I just was the receiver of regular talk therapy. And I just was trying all these things on this healing quest across the world for probably 17 years. Then it led me to a week of ayahuasca in Colombia. And when that didn't work, after trying everything else, I'm like, I guess there's no repair, like
I guess this
isn't working. I guess I'm just going to be struggling with the bulimia, with the alcohol dependency, and with running from my feelings for the rest of my life. And then about 6 months later, I was in Bali and a friend said, you have to try this breathwork practice. And she told me it actually just made her bulimia go away. And I was like, what? Like nothing has even put a dent in my eating disorder and my numbing out through food. So I went a little bit skeptical. If I was honest, my pranayama part of my yoga training, I couldn't get into because I had the monkey mind and I had too many things that needed to be felt and released to just focus on my breath. So I'm like, I don't know about this breathing stuff, but I'll give it a try. And within about 15 minutes, I was in this deep, non-ordinary state of consciousness. I was surrounded by a group of strangers also breathing. And usually, my ego would be like, you can't cry in front of people, but I didn't care. And I had the biggest cathartic release of my life. And I just kind of went back to my little inner child and was just crying out for some like affirmation and love, which, my family did the best they could. It was just these things that I held on to that I wasn't even conscious of. I didn't realize.
Most of us are not, let's just throw that out there, actually aren't conscious of those belief systems that are driving the behavior.
Yeah, and we're looking for these numbing tools or like instant gratification and dopamine hits, but we don't realize what's behind it. And we also don't realize that you can't pick and choose your feelings. So if you're numbing out the sadness, the loneliness, the grief, you can't feel the joy and the happiness, connection, and love without, you just can't feel that naturally because you can't pick and choose. So I was living in this numbed out state.
So important. Like, I think I need you to say, like, I think we need to pause on that for a minute because that is so important. What you just said. It's not like we get to pick, cannot pick and choose.
Yeah. So if you want to be connected to the love, the joy, all of the bright things in life naturally, then you need to give yourself the space to feel the other stuff. And we all, we never escape our childhood without something that needs to be processed, and many things for many of us. And so when I finally had that space to just really feel and have this massive cry, first I felt very tired because I just was such a physical release. But the next day I was like, whoa, the colors are brighter. I feel more confident. Somehow I don't really care as much what people think about me. And I really had one of those true rebirth moments where I felt like a different human after this 1 hour of breathing. So I knew that day that this is something I want to bring to the world for the rest of my life. Almost 10 years ago, that was when I discovered this. And I'm just as passionate about it today and so grateful for this work. And I've just seen it help so many people, and it's helped me so profoundly that I just think everyone needs to know that the breath, we have it. It's with us always.
Always.
You know, and we can be our own healer, and we need to give ourselves the space to feel and to release.
So powerful. And I think, I know for sure there's people listening right now as they talked about you just shared your experience, that they're like, oh my gosh, I can never do that. That's so scary.
The breath work?
Yes, so many, just the emotional release we can experience. I've witnessed that too. And my own breathwork sessions, leading breathwork training, watching emotion that can finally be released out of the body. And I know there's people listening right now that are like, too scary. What do you want to say to them? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I would say just go anyways, and you get to be in control the whole time with the breath. And so you can go with that intention that I'm not going to, but what will likely happen is as we do this breathing pattern of the connected breathing, it changes the physiology, which leads to a redistribution of the oxygen in the brain. So that part of you, it's just a part of you. It's just that little part that's saying you can't feel it. And actually, once that part quiets down, the amygdala gets more oxygen and blood flow, which is your emotional center. So that amygdala, finally, those feelings you've been processing and saying you can't feel, or you're too scared to feel with other people, can finally come up. And I have just had hundreds of breathers that have come and said, I haven't cried since so-and-so passed away 10 years ago, or a lot of people have been saying they haven't cried since they were children. And they're like, how did you make me do that? And I'm like, I didn't. That was you and your breath. And they walk away and they look lighter afterwards. You see it in their face and their body. So just go and know you're in control, and you can return to normal breath if it feels like it's too much. But chances are, if you go and give yourself this chance to breathe and be still for an hour, something will be felt, and you will feel so much better for it. So important, I think, because also to take a minute to look at that. The reason why we feel like we couldn't express that emotion at some time, I truly believe, was a form of protection. Like we need, so also like having some compassion maybe for yourself to just be able to say, like, it's also like, I can acknowledge I want this experience. Like what Megan's saying is resonating. And also it can feel scary, maybe scary because at some point you weren't able to actually feel what you needed. Hence why we do things like breath work. Yes, 1,000%. And right, like these both can be true. That part could be fearful of it, and there's also a part that really wants it and really needs it. And maybe some of you are feeling that curiosity right now, and that curiosity we always talk about on the show is so important. So important towards healing. So we talk a lot on this podcast about the nervous system, and like we just talked about, protection, right? That so many of us I truly believe our nervous system has done the best it could to keep us safe from what it felt like it needed to. So how do you explain what conscious connected breathwork is actually doing in the body from a nervous system perspective? I know you mentioned the amygdala, but wondering if you could just go a little bit more. And we talk a lot about the logical part of the brain with the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala with fight or flight and trying to find safety. So yeah, I would love to, because this is what's interesting about conscious connected breathwork, is that we are purposely working primarily with the sympathetic nervous system, so the branch that's responsible for the fight and flight response, whereas most breathing practices are all about the parasympathetic rest and digest. And the reason that we do this is that all of our activated experiences, potentially traumas or adverse experiences, emotionally charged experiences, were primarily in sympathetic nervous system state. And very often those things get locked in our body. You might even remember a time when you were so scared you lost your breath. You gasped for air. So we're losing our breath in these moments, and then there's this stuck energy in there that's never been processed. And so when we can go back to a similar physiological state, we go back into that sympathetic nervous system state, but do it in a way that we're choosing. So doing it in an empowered and safe way, that's when we can start to work through these things that our body and our nervous system has been hanging on to, so that we can process them and actually release them to create some real change. And so I consider it to be more of a root cause practice, whereas everyday breathing practices are very beneficial in the moment in our high stress society, but they're kind of band-aid solutions, and they're not getting to the root of what is keeping you so activated, so that the littlest drop is enough to make you feel overwhelmed. So when we can start to work the root, then your capacity to flow between sympathetic and parasympathetic is restored, and you can respond. Your body can respond appropriately, and the littlest thing doesn't feel so activating and so overwhelming.
So important and so important. And yeah, we need that sympathetic activation, that, like you said, that intentional, purposefully doing it in a way, in an environment that feels hopefully safe and supportive. Hopefully that's what you experience in the breath work.
That's where the safety element comes in that I'm lobbying for.
Right. So then we can engage the parasympathetic after and allow that repatterning to happen.
Yeah. And I actually just learned this term yesterday, interestingly, about parasympathetic rebound. Have you heard of that?
No, teach me.
So with activating breathing practices, not just connected breath work, but potentially even Wim Hof and certain pranayama ones like Breath of Fire that are more sympathetic working,
right.
You're activating and increasing that intensity and tension, but afterwards there's a rebound in the parasympathetic where you get this really deep level of calm. And I see this in all my sessions. Like everybody walks away feeling so calm and relaxed. And this is one reason why is after you've dialed it up, the parasympathetic rebounds in a way where it comes back onto a higher point than it was before.
Oh yeah, I knew that. I just hadn't heard that term, but I actually really like that.
Yeah, I know. I hadn't heard the term either.
And that's why it's really important. And next thing that kind of brings me, what I'm going to ask you is, it is important, like sometimes why we try this with somebody. Like it is important based on what we've been through that we are, we are doing our breath work with people that actually know what they're doing. I think that's really important because breath work is really popular right now. It's really popular all over social media. I see more breathwork popping up locally, but not all breathwork practices and trainers, not all of that is created equal. What do you wish people knew before they went into breathwork? This is something I talk to my clients a lot about, but I want to get your perspective.
Yeah, so many things. Firstly, like you said, breathwork got popular so quickly in the last 5 years that it's not fully regulated yet, and it is the Wild West. And particularly when you're working with activated breathing, where there's the connected breathing in particular, and the sympathetic nervous system, you don't want to just be guiding yourself or turning that over to anybody. And there are trainings that are calling themselves trauma-informed that are 50 hours. And I don't think you could do anything in a trauma-informed way in 50 hours. It's just not possible. And I think a lot of people believe, well, it's just the breath, so it can't be dangerous. But because of the physiological changes that happen with conscious connected breath work, you're working with trauma. Inherently, it comes up for processing. You're working with the activated nervous system, which I already talked about. You also get access to your subconscious programming. And I've heard of facilitators using that. So they actually waited till like about halfway through the session and then started to try to sell their upgraded packages to the breathers because they had access to their subconscious. So it's really the Wild West. There is also contraindications because it's an activated practice. For instance, if you can't do high intensity exercise, it might not be safe for you to do conscious connected breath work because your heart rate and your blood pressure might go up temporarily. And then there's I have a list of 29 contraindications and it's always growing. And so if you're not aware of those, this is why you need the facilitator and you need somebody who's trained to check for these contraindications and offer modifications. Because I also believe in inclusivity and that the breath is for everybody and there's always ways to modify it so that it can be safe.
Same. So yeah, if you're thinking, oh, I bet I have one of those or a couple of those contraindications, what would you say to somebody like that? Okay, yeah. So for sure.
Just make sure that you choose someone who's done, I like to say at least 400 hours of training. And then for the conscious connected breathwork, the closest thing we have to a governing body is the Global Professional Breathwork Alliance, or GPBA. And they have a website directory, so you can go on there and find somebody. And even if it means you have to do it online, it's better to go with someone who's qualified than to do it in person with somebody who isn't. And someone who's not trauma informed because they don't understand the window of tolerance. And as you know, so many people have anxiety nowadays. Like the numbers just blew up after COVID in particular. And panic attacks, or a history of having a panic attack. And a lot of the sensations in these sessions can feel like a panic attack coming on if you're not properly prepared for it. If you are prepared for it, you're like, oh, okay, Leanna told me I might get tingling in my hands, or are you familiar with the tetany, the claw hands?
Always talk about that ahead of time.
Yeah, for me, that's like 101. If a facilitator doesn't mention tetany, that's a red flag.
Right.
But you need to understand what's causing it, and also how to use the break at any time. And you need agency and empowerment. That's another thing, is because it's the Wild West, I'm seeing and hearing stories of facilitators that are chasing catharsis because they think that it needs to be the yelling and the bawling in order for it to be something. But they're doing it and they're not honoring each person's nervous system capacity. And they're not honoring the importance of agency. Like, everything should be a suggestion in these sessions. It should never be a demand.
And that with those two things, like capacity and agency, are two things I take very seriously.
Me too.
Really, really important.
Yeah.
Maybe can you speak on those two things, because you brought them up and I resonate with that. We've talked about capacity a lot and window of tolerance on the podcast, but specifically when you are thinking about, if you want to try out breath work, maybe you're brand new to it and you haven't, why are capacity and agency so important to you?
Yeah. So I think agency in particular, because nobody knows better than you and your inner wisdom.
Let's say that again.
Nobody knows better than you and your inner wisdom.
Not even a breathwork practitioner.
You know, I've been doing it 10 years. I still don't know better than you. You know best. So that's what I say in the frame. Everything I say in this session will be a suggestion. Always listen to your inner wisdom first and foremost. And especially if it's a group session, because that facilitator might see, okay, half the people are barely breathing. They could breathe more. But then what about the few in there that are already turbocharged? So the directions can't apply to the whole group because not everyone is at the same capacity. And for some people, you know, you might have, if you're having PTSD and flashbacks, or depending on what else you're dealing with in your own personal window of tolerance, you might not be ready for a full-length group session. That could be too intense. You might do better working with a facilitator one-on-one, who, do you speak a lot about titration and pendulation as well? Yeah, who titrates the experience little by little, a little drop. So let's start with just 20 minutes. Let's start with a little bit slower of music. And then let's go for a little bit longer at the next session, depending on how you go. Or we'll do a check-in, and if you're ready, we'll continue with it. And then there's pendulation, where if you see it's getting too intense, you can throw on a slower song. You can invite them to return and orient if they need to. Yeah, pendulating to the edges and back. And then each time you do a session and you make it through, your window of tolerance actually gradually increases.
Which is how we expand capacity. We expand capacity through safety, not always through force. I mean, not through force.
Never through force,
through pushing.
Thank you for tying that together.
And that's how we expand. And we've talked a lot about the window of tolerance. So that is ultimately how we expand our capacity, is through safety. And that you might watch someone's crazy. Then there's a lot of really intense breathwork videos on like Instagram or other social media platforms, but also realize that might not be the way for you to expand your capacity. And it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to look like that for you, especially if you're not feeling ready.
I think, you know, overwhelm is something I speak to a lot as well.
For sure.
You know, the activating practice, it is about being at your own tender edge. But if you're ever feeling overwhelmed by anything, whether it's a sensation, emotion, whatever, soften the breath, slow it down, use that break until you feel resourced and safe. Then you can dial it up again. So you get to play around with that for the whole session. So you're working within your own capacity. And I think some people's trauma responses, or even their cultural upbringing, is that you have to listen to authority. And even though facilitators aren't an authority, they think that you are. And so they just listen to it if you don't give them the explicit permission in the beginning, before the session starts, to listen to their inner wisdom first and foremost, and that everything you say is a suggestion. That's why those two things need to be emphasized so much, because otherwise they might just like, well, Megan says breathe more, I've got to breathe more, even though I'm feeling really scared.
Which then might activate, it might be counterintuitive based on what you're trying to heal and work on, because you're then just going back to a place that you don't feel safe.
Yes, and exactly. There's the safety element.
And we know that we do not heal intentionally forward if the body doesn't actually feel safe to do so.
Yeah. And safety is just cultivated on so many levels. You know, the facilitator's nervous system sets the room. Even the way the place is set up, like I teach my students, set the mats out, clear any clutter, make it nice lighting, have soft music. All of these things give cues to the nervous system that they're safe. When you walk into a room and everyone's got zigzag mats like a puzzle piece and you're walking over people, that's not giving you the felt sense of safety where you can relax.
So important. I'm so glad you brought that up. So speaking of that, because you are an advocate of trauma-informed practice, as I am too, If someone's starting to explore breath work, let's say just they want to start somewhere locally in their town, like what are some red flags that you would look for maybe in choosing a facilitator versus things you would want in a facilitator?
Yeah. So I would ask about their certification. Okay. And again, if they're saying it's a 50-hour certification, or they don't tell you it, but you can look it up and see how long that training is. I think also just looking at their promotional material. If they're guaranteeing you will have this, you will get that.
Those
that's
extremes.
Not good. Yeah, it should be may, or like common experiences may include, but never promising anything, because everyone's session is different every time. Everyone's experiencing the breath, the medicine differently every time. So there can be no guarantees. If they're just coming off like really sensationalized, if they have the YouTube videos of everybody screaming, for me in a trauma-informed container, screaming is actually one of the few rules that I have in my sessions, is I say no screaming because it's dysregulating for others in the group who aren't expecting it. If you want to guide one collective scream, that's okay, but just to have someone on the other side of the room screaming, that can be very activating for somebody else's nervous system. So you can even ask them, like, does it say trauma informed? That's a huge green flag if it says trauma informed on their page. Or if they're GPBA certified, at least then you know they've done a 400-hour training, and the GPBA has so many regulations for the curriculum to just make sure that at least you're meeting the bare minimum for ethics and for holding the space in a safer way.
So powerful and so important.
Yeah.
Also, for somebody, because you mentioned PTSD, I think that's really important. I work with a lot of first responders and other people like in my clinical space, you know, that are actually working through past traumas. What's the best way to go for them to go about trying to experience breath work?
Yeah. So first, I just for anyone who's not aware, like I want to separate trauma from PTSD, because we all have some level of trauma.
Right.
Group sessions is great for them, for most people with trauma, but when you have PTSD and active symptoms, you definitely want to be working in a one-on-one container with someone who's trauma-informed and letting them know, because they're going to be better able to hold you and titrate your experience if they're aware of it. So you want to be really upfront with your facilitator. There is usually a code of ethics where it's all confidential, and have them and ask them beforehand, like, you know, will you be using tools like titration or pendulation in the session, to feel out their answer. And if they're like, what? That's probably not a good sign.
Like, okay, I'm going to move on.
But do know that it is possible to do the practice. I have a former student who's been a therapist for 20 years, and she says that if you've had flashbacks in the last 6 weeks, that maybe is too soon to be doing it, because you are going into a non-ordinary state. It could be intense. But if it's been about 6 weeks since having really intense active symptoms, that's usually a good time to start working with the breath in a titrated way.
Titrated again. And if you guys don't know what titrated means we're just going to slow it down.
Yeah, you think of like the drop burst, you're just putting a little drop at a time, versus like, oh, I'm just going to dump this chemical into this chemical and see what kind of explosion happens. Let's just do a drop to see what happens. I think another important thing I want to speak to is grounding and integration after. You know, there's a lot of facilitators that have these sensational experiences, and then they just like, okay, go and drive now. Like they just finished breathing 5 minutes and now they're standing up and trying to get into a car, and they're like, what just happened to me? For me, it's invaluable, and it's necessary that there is a space after, first to ground back into your body. If you have to have a shorter activated breathing so that you have a longer coming back, do that. They also need a chance to talk about it. So in a group, there's always an open floor for sharing,
which I
and
love.
there's always ground rules, no advice. Yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, so much trauma is about separation and isolation, and I'm alone. So when you can have a sharing circle and hear other people going through these things, it can be just as healing as the breath itself. Those sharing circles can be so invaluable to just have it be held and heard. So, and even in a one-on-one, there should be a chance for you to share what happened to you if you'd like with your facilitator. There should be a chance to write anything down. Not everyone's a writer. Some people have physically intense experiences that they don't want to write about, but having the option is always good, because that's how some people integrate. And then just being told things like drinking extra water, doing something grounding before you go to bed after the session, and always having the opportunity to reach out to the facilitator if they need more support. Sometimes things come up the next day. You know, so always having that open door where it's not just, okay, you paid for your ticket, you breathe hard, get out of here, go deal with it.
I always like to say we can't like determine the time frame that the body wants to process. So sometimes it might, like, I don't think it's not surprising when the body, a few days later, you might notice things or things come up, or sometimes it's kind of just aha moments, even like really beautiful things too, where you're like, oh, like you notice the colors and things the next day, right? Like, so sometimes vibrancy can increase, but also maybe some other memories might come up. So it is really important that you feel like you have somebody too after that you can go back to.
Yes, 1,000%.
So important. Okay, so a lot of my listeners are moms who are trying to heal not only themselves, but are really working on releasing things as moms to not pass on to their children. So just want to see your experience with breathwork, maybe working with moms and just kind of that generational aspect, as a lot of women are like, I don't want to pass this forward. I'm really trying to be the one that heals forward differently.
Yeah. So I just see this happening so often in my sessions and the shares that like they had these experiences where they feel like they're healing generational trauma. And like sometimes they even go back into a past loved one's body, the mom, the grandma, the great grandparent, and like process feelings for them in a way. But also just on a more like everyday conversational level, I think having this want and this awareness that I don't want to pass this on is huge, because you can be mindful, but inevitably you're going to be repeating patterns until you start to work bottom up with the body, until you start to give yourself a space to feel it, to move through it. Then you can be thinking in the moment how you're reacting, versus just automatically going back to how your mom did it or your dad did it and your grandparents did it. And that's where you really break it. I think getting the mental awareness is great, but then bringing it into the body is really where those generational patterns can be changed, and you can start to respond to your children and to your family versus reacting, because your nervous system becomes more balanced and not overwhelmed.
I love that, which again shows an expansion in capacity for sure.
Yeah.
What breath work have you ever had moms like want to do breath work with their kids, and what do you recommend if moms are listening and they're like, I would like to start doing some like more intentional breathing with my kids at home?
Yeah, it really depends on age. So like under 13 would definitely not be the activated conscious connected breathwork, but I have had teenagers 14 and up that came, like mothers and daughters, and it's really beautiful because at the end, the daughters will open up. Usually they wouldn't tell their moms these things, but they're just so open and expanded. And sometimes I'll even invite them to reach out and hold each other's hands if that feels nice. And every time I've given that invitation, they have, which in today's society, like mothers and teenage daughters aren't holding hands. But when you're in that expanded state, it just creates this deep, deep connection. So older children can do that. But if you want to start real young, even at 3, you can introduce breath awareness when your child's getting overwhelmed. Okay, let's check in with our breath. Can we slow it down into our bellies? Or there's fun ones for children, like the bumblebee breath where you're humming, and that's helping to activate the vagus nerve. Yeah, and it's a down-regulating practice, so that's going to get them out of like their temper tantrum or whatever is going on. So bumblebee breath, making it fun and playful when they're really young. You know, by the age of like 7 or 8, they could be doing simple practices like coherence breath, just breathing in and out to 5, and doing the rounds with them. You know, not to be like, this is what you need to practice.
Modeling
Make it something that you do it together. Maybe you do it every day before dinner. You know, every day you guys do one round of box breathing, and then the next day coherence breathing, and you find ones to just make it something that it's so ingrained in their lives that they start to turn to it when they really need it.
Totally. And I think that's the thing. I volunteer a lot at the schools and teaching teachers and school counselors, just basic breathing and tapping and other body-based tools to support. And so the younger the kids learn it, it's so beautiful, because it's just like the easier it is for them to do it. It's harder to first teach teenagers, you know, in a school setting versus little kindergartners, and they're just so excited. So the younger, not saying you can't, right? All age, we can all learn.
No,
we all have capacity to expand, but it's just so fun.
It reminds me of learning a second language, right? If you can learn it before 8, it just becomes innate, and you can pick up 3rd and 4th and 5th languages. So if we can teach our children as young as 3 and 4 to just be aware of their breath, and then start guiding them through breathing practices, then it just becomes second nature, and it's just a tool that they have for the rest of their life.
Literally the rest of their life. So I think that's the thing I see in my clinical work and coaching spaces, any somatic work, is I think the thing that people will say that's changed their life the most is intention with the breath.
Yeah. And it's just always with us. You can't forget it at home. You don't need to charge your battery to use
it. I love it. You cannot. It can feel like you forgot your breath somewhere else. But I love that. It's always with us. It's free. It lets us know that we are living in our body, and such a beautiful reminder that we can use that to increase our presence, to increase our capacity to release what we've been holding on so tightly for so long.
Yeah. And
So.
one thing I want to mention is just breath awareness. It doesn't always have to be breathing practices. Sometimes sometimes I'll have my students or my participants set an alarm 3 or 4 times a day. And every time it goes off, they need to just stop and check in with their breath. And then as you do that, it starts to just become second nature. And then also starting to notice, how are other people breathing? When your boss is getting angry or your child's starting to get upset, like how are they breathing? And then as you start to notice other people's breath, it reminds you also to check in with your own breath. And it's just this beautiful feedback loop that teaches more conscious breathing, so that you're harnessing your breath in your everyday life to help calm yourself down and keep yourself more regulated.
So important. I think that's the big thing when people start to become aware of their breath. They're just so surprised how much they hold it, or they're breathing really rapid and breathing
so
up
fast
here,
and up here.
breathing up here in the chest. Yeah. Well, Megan, so tell people how they can find you, what you're offering. I know you guys can, everything about Megan too will be in the show notes. So whatever she's saying, we'll make sure is there, that you can find her, but just let everybody know like what you're offering and what they need to know.
Yeah, thank you. So many things. So my company is Unity Breathwork, and if you would ever be interested in training to become a trauma-informed facilitator, I offer trainings throughout the year. It's internationally certified, so you'll get that link for the website. I also offer 3 retreats a year, and they're 8-day retreats, and I intentionally designed them to have a lot of rest and relaxation time. Because I think a lot of retreats are just so crammed with things and
full schedules every day.
Right? And it's like you leave more tired than before you went.
Yeah, that's what she's not what she's talking about.
No, this is a vacation as well as a powerful transformation, because you're getting 6 full-length breathwork sessions, workshops, regular sharing circles woven into it. But you get your mornings to yourself and your evenings to yourself.
Are those in Mexico?
Salida, Mexico, the magical beach town. So special. So I have that. I'm actually doing a free online session, a full-length group breathwork session at the end of September, on September 27th.
Powerful.
And so all of that is online. You can also find me on Instagram at Unity Breathwork as well.
So exciting. I hope you guys will check out Megan's information. And if you have any questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you just either through the forum on my website, or just you can email me, megan@unitybreathwork.com. My name is Megan. There's so many ways to spell Megan. It's like, is there an H, an A, 2 H's?
I'm so excited about that. And for sure, I'm going to check my schedule. I hope I can make that free breathwork session.
Yeah,
such a great way to start.
And
such a
and
powerful
for anyone
way.
who can't make it, I do offer online sessions as well. So you could always get me for an online couples or mother-daughter session or one-on-one session.
Fun. I hope you guys will. I hope you guys will look at Megan's info. So Megan, any last words for people, especially those again that are exploring breathwork for the first time? Maybe let's take it 2 ways. Those that are kind of exploring it for the first time, that's part 1, and then part 2, those that had a bad experience with breathwork or negative.
Yeah. If you're exploring it for your first time, I really just encourage you to not underestimate the power of your own breath. I really had, until I tried this particular breathing practice, and then it opened up so much for me. And then from there, all the rest of the breathing practices just fell into place, and they made so much sense. So know the breath has something for you. It is everybody's medicine. I want you to also know you are your own best healer, and you should seek out wellness practitioners. They're all about empowering you. And that's what I love about the breath, is it's inherently empowering. And then if you've had a bad experience, you're not alone. It's happening way too much. I'm trying my best to get the message out there.
Which is what I love about you. And we need to have more of these conversations. So so what do you say to that person that's like, I tried that, don't know if I could do that again?
Not for me. Yeah. Most likely that was nothing to do with you and your breath. That was unfortunately not safely held, potentially not trauma informed. It could have even been, scary if you were pushed outside of your window of tolerance, but that's not the breath. And please try again, but make sure you're working with somebody who has experience and is properly trained and trauma informed, and make
Megan.
Sure that the empowerment element is in there. Thank you. Yeah.
That empowerment element is important. Again, I think that all goes back to feeling safe in the body. And we know that felt sense of safety is ultimately what creates capacity and helps us have and experience maybe all those things that we weren't sure were possible for us, but they are.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Megan, for being here. It's just so lovely to get to talk to you. Just also gets me excited to talk to people that care about practices being trauma informed. So it's a really, really important part of the conversation. So I hope that whatever you guys are doing out there in the world, exploring with, experimenting with, as far as alternative forms of healing and ways of connecting more to your body, that you take trauma-informed practices seriously.
Thank you so much, Leanna. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So you guys make it a beautiful rest of your week wherever you are. Take a few moments to notice your breath, connect to yourself, and just remember it's such a beautiful reminder that we get to spend another day alive. So until next time, bye guys.